So, I originally hadn't been planning on doing a video response to this, however, several of my viewers encouraged it, so I felt like I'd go ahead and do it. Basically, Geerup, the majority of your video can be summed up by either A, mischaracterizing or misunderstanding what I had said. That or simply it's generally false. For example, I'll just go ahead and dive right into it. You started off by saying that creationism is the only reasonable alternative. First of all, that's incorrect simply because creationism is not a reasonable alternative. I define a reasonable alternative as something that's supported by evidence. Creationism is not only not supported by the evidence, but it's contradicted by every ounce of evidence. So, hence, creationism is not a reasonable alternative. If you want to go ahead and consider something that's contradicted by every shred of empirical evidence as reasonable, then that's your prerogative. However, to me and the rest of the world, I don't think that that's simply the case. That's not classified as reasonable, and that is exactly why it's not a reasonable alternative. Basically, my point is simply that the idea that we were created from magical Jesus mud is about as valid and reasonable as the idea that the Earth sits on the back of a giant turtle. Both are unreasonable. Next, you commented on why wouldn't I be for the fair and balanced treatment of creationism. Well, not really surprising. Creationism, like most things claiming to be fair and balanced, are neither. Creationism demands special treatment because it wants to bypass all the rigorous testing and confirmation and everything like that that every other scientific theory has to go through and be directly injected into the classrooms. That's the exact opposite of being fair, and in fact I covered this in my video. There's absolutely nothing fair about sending creationism directly into the classrooms. If they want to go ahead and go about it the peer-reviewed way, study it, publish evidence, things like that, see you at the cell biology meetings, as Ken Miller put it, by all means, I'm all for that. If they want to go about it the normal scientific method, then by all means they should be considered as well. However, they don't do that because their evidence simply doesn't back up their theory. As such, it shouldn't be incorporated directly into the classroom. Normal scientific theories have to go about the scientific method and scientific processes to be injected into the classroom. Your goal is to simply bypass all this, and aside from being directly injected, you would rather go about like judicial and legislative ways in trying to persuade public opinion to get your idea in, which is completely, aside from unconstitutional and immoral, it's factually incorrect. So the fair and balanced treatment of creationism would be to have it go along the same ideals and procedures that every other scientific theory has to. Your next comment was regarding whether or not every single shred of empirical evidence supports evolution, and my response to that would be yes, you can quote me on that. In fact, why don't we debate it? Why don't we debate your evidence? I'm perfectly open for it. If you want to, you know where to find me. The point is simply that evolution is no different from any other scientific theory. For example, we don't know exactly what hepatic IGF-2 receptors do, however, we know that the cell theory is correct. The same thing goes with evolution. The gaps in it or kinks or anything like that, it's not incomparable to any other scientific theory, which you would specifically hold as true. So why evolution? Why signal it out? What's so special about evolution? I just don't understand that part. Next, you brought up flat earth and Christianity. No, I wasn't blaming the flat earth mentality on Christianity. However, I was saying that it was, as a logical argument, your response was to teach both sides of a theory. Well, what about the round earth? Shouldn't we teach both sides to that by your logic? So logically, I'm using something which is absurd to point out the errors in your logic. I wasn't blaming that on Christianity or anything, so there's no reason to roll your eyes on it unless you can come up with a reason that it's logically unsound to teach both sides of one thing but not another. Next, you went on to saying that you misquoted me and said that if I believe in a creator, if you believe in a creator, then you're intellectually bankrupt. No, that's not what I was saying at all. You said that in response to the Huckabee clip, and I said, do you see why Huckabee's logic is intellectually bankrupt? And for, again, the flat earth reason that I just mentioned, among other things, the direct injection of creationism into the classrooms. It's a logically bankrupt idea, not the concept of a creator. I believe in a creator. However, what I was saying, and you completely misquoted me, was that the direct injection and teaching both sides of a controversy is intellectually bankrupt, which it is. You next went on to go ahead and say that you laughed at the comment that the flying spaghetti monster is better off in the classrooms than creationism is, but why would you laugh at that? That's what I don't understand. Is that here you have two ideas which are false, one of which supports or is supported by evidence. That is to say, the flying spaghetti monster, which teaches that it's going around tricking all the test results and fooling all the scientists to make it appear as if things evolved, whereas creationism simply says that they didn't evolve. reality of the matter is that things clearly do evolve. So reality is more consistent with the predictions made by the Gospel of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. As such, it has a better place in our classrooms. Now, don't get me wrong, both have no place in our classrooms. However, if you were to pick something purely from an objective standpoint, something which is contradicted by evidence and something which is supported by evidence, you're a fool if you pick the one that's contradicted. Next, you were saying that I called the idea of God an absurdity, which I wasn't doing. I was actually calling the idea of the Flying Spaghetti Monster an absurdity. So I wasn't calling God. You completely misquoted, misunderstood, or mischaracterized me. One of the whatever. Now, after that, you went on to go ahead and say that it's not the evidence, the similarities in DNA. You see the same evidence that I do. You simply just see common designer. Well, you're utterly and completely incorrect there for a couple reasons. First of all, I actually did a video on why same gene, same designer is not a valid argument. It's not simply that we have the same genes, oh, therefore we must, have evolved. No, it's not that at all. It's not the similarities, it's not the differences, it's a distinct pattern which is only explainable by common descent. Secondly, you don't see the same evidence that I do because you haven't been trained in biology since high school. So you have no clue about the vast majority of the evidence which completely supports evolution. If you did, your videos completely are neglectful of it, so you're either being dishonest by not mentioning it, or you really don't know what you're talking about. Check out some of my videos. I've got a pretty good definitive proof of evolution series, and yes, I realize that proof only applies to logic and mathematics, however, given the circumstances. Check out those. Check out my creationism evolution let's test them video. I've got plenty of videos on this subject if you're actually willing to learn, but the problem is that you're not. So please don't say that we sit here and see the same evidence, because you're not seeing much evidence with your eyes and ears closed. So now let's move on to the theological side of the argument. I already said that I had planned on doing a video on my faith in a couple weeks. In addition to that, though, I don't really like debating theology simply because it gets you nowhere. There's nothing really objective that you can, that's supported by empirical evidence by any, really appreciable degree to have a definitive conclusion either way. So I don't really feel the need or compulsion to debate it. However, you brought it up so really quickly. Some problems with creationism theologically. First of all, it speaks poorly of a god. 99.9% of species, of every species rather, that has ever lived is now extinct. So your view of God is of this little peon god that's hand-painting everything, screwed up a species, it died, it went extinct, oh well, I'll make another. Your God has a 0.1% success rate. Whereas my view of my God, my creator, to have enough intelligence to design a system knowing what the outcome would be. Second of all, literalism removes all schools or all thought whatsoever from interpretation of the Bible, which is also very dangerous. The Bible, in its correct historical interpretation, is to be read like a newspaper. Some parts are classified, some parts are classifieds, some parts are front-page news, some parts are history, some parts are comics, some parts are letters to the editor. It's supposed to be read as such. It has several different authors, and this is another major problem that you have, especially considering that you take the Old Testament and Genesis as if it has one single author, and you take it literally, which by all means removes any need for thought whatsoever, which is dangerous for many reasons. Also, your other problem is that you seem to be supporting your faith in God by, any hole in science you view as proof in God. But the problem with that comes at any time that knowledge fills those holes, you view that as an attack on God. So you automatically have the position of knowledge being an attack on God, which is very dangerous as well. Furthermore, your faith is weak simply because whenever those holes get filled, what are you going to be left with? So there are many reasons why your view on God and theology is completely wrong. And lastly, not to make an argument of authority, and I'm aware that someone could claim that. However, the past several popes have accepted evolution, which I think speaks pretty strongly about the lack of a theological conflict between the two. Also, you claim that I'm a wolf in sheep's clothing, but why? Because I don't accept your medieval ideas of a peon god, which are contradicted by evidence? What do I gain by it? I mean, most of my supporters, or most of my subscribers rather, are atheists, so I don't really get any street cred with them. I mean, I gain absolutely nothing from falsely claiming that I'm a Christian. I simply don't believe that the same God who endowed me with reason, sense, intellect, and logic intended for me to forgo their use. Lastly, I'm not sure if I said this already or not, but thank you again, Thunderfoot. I really appreciate it. And if you ever want to debate, I'm referring to you, Geerup, by all means, I'm here. You know where to find me. Lastly, yes, I got a new headset microphone, so the poor sound quality won't really be an issue. This video being an exception. So thank you very much for your time, guys.